Life, in its simplest form, can paint a beautiful picture. For Grace, her canvas was filled with bright colours. She had Richard, her husband, a man whose laughter once echoed warmly through their home. Together they created a small world, a haven they believed was strong. Their two daughters, Ella and Naomi, were the heartbeats of this world. Ella, the elder, was thoughtful, her eyes often lost in books. Naomi, younger and full of spirit, chased butterflies in their small garden. Their home was modest, a little house with a porch swing where dreams were shared under starry nights. It was a life stitched with everyday moments, precious and pure. Richard was a builder, his hands strong and capable. He built things, fixed things, and Grace believed he could fix anything. He would come home smelling of sawdust and sweat, and the girls would run to him. He would lift them high, their giggles like wind chimes. Grace would watch from the kitchen, her heart swelling with a quiet joy. Dinners were simple affairs, filled with stories of school and work. Weekends meant picnics in the park or trips to the nearby lake. It felt like a forever kind of happiness, the kind you read about in storybooks, the kind you hold on to tightly. Ella loved to listen to her father's stories of the buildings he helped create. She imagined him as a magician, turning plans into real places. Naomi preferred to help her mother in the garden, her small hands patting down the soil around new flowers. Grace taught them about patience, about nurturing life. She believed these simple lessons were important. She saw her family as a garden, needing constant care, love and sunshine. She thought they had all the sunshine they needed. The future seemed like a long sunlit path, stretching out before them, full of promise. The changes in Richard were subtle at first, like the slow fading of a vibrant colour. He started coming home later. The smell of sawdust was sometimes replaced by a faint, unfamiliar perfume. His laughter became less frequent, his stories shorter. He seemed distant, his mind elsewhere, even when he was physically present. Grace would ask if everything was all right, and he would nod, a quick, dismissive gesture. He said work was stressful, that projects were demanding more of his time. Grace tried to understand. She tried to be supportive, to give him space, hoping the shadows would pass. The girls noticed too, in the way children do. Ella found her father less willing to share stories. Naomi's playful tugs on his sleeve were sometimes met with a tired sigh. The easy rhythm of their family life began to falter. There were more quiet dinners now, the silence punctuated by the clinking of forks against plates. Grace would try to fill the void, talking about the girls' school day, about the garden. But Richard's responses were often monosyllabic, his eyes holding a faraway look. The warmth in their home began to cool, slowly, almost imperceptibly, like a forgotten hearth. Then came the hushed phone calls, the ones Richard took in another room, his voice low and guarded. Grace's heart began to ache with a nameless fear. She didn't want to believe what the whispers in her mind suggested. She clung to the image of the man she had married, the father of her children. She told herself it was just a phase, a difficult period that would soon end. But the shadows grew longer, darker, stretching across the life they had built. The air grew heavy with unasked questions, with unspoken anxieties. One evening, the truth came crashing down. It wasn't a sudden explosion, but a quiet, devastating confession. Richard sat Grace down, his face pale, his voice devoid of its usual strength. He spoke of another woman. He spoke of unhappiness, of feelings he could no longer deny. Each word was a hammer blow to Grace's heart, shattering the beautiful picture she had cherished. The man she loved, the foundation of her world, was walking away. The life they had built together was crumbling into pieces before her very eyes. The whispers had become a roar. The day Richard left, the sky was an indifferent blue. He packed a single suitcase, his movements stiff and awkward. There were no grand pronouncements, no dramatic scenes, just a quiet severing, a finality that hung heavy in the air. Ella stood by her bedroom door watching, her young face a mask of confusion and hurt. Naomi, too young to fully grasp the magnitude of it all, clung to Grace's leg, sensing the deep sorrow that enveloped her mother. Grace felt like a statue, frozen, unable to speak, unable to stop the inevitable. Richard paused at the door, his hand on the knob. He looked back, not at Grace, but at the space they had shared. Perhaps he saw ghosts of laughter, of shared dreams. Or perhaps he saw nothing at all. He mumbled a few words about being sorry, words that felt hollow, empty. Then he was gone. The sound of the front door closing echoed through the house, a definitive, heartbreaking sound. It was the sound of a chapter ending, a promise broken, a family torn apart. The silence he left behind was deafening. Grace stood there for a long time, the imprint of his departure seared into her memory. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. How could this happen? How could the man who promised forever simply walk away? The questions swirled in her mind, a painful vortex. She looked at her daughters, their faces etched with a dawning understanding of loss. Ella's eyes were wide with unshed tears. Naomi buried her face deeper into Grace's side. In that moment, Grace knew she had to be strong, not just for herself, but for them. Her own pain would have to wait. The house felt suddenly vast, empty. The scent of his sawdust was gone, replaced by a chilling emptiness. Every corner held a memory, now tinged with sadness. The porch swing swayed gently in the breeze, a lonely sentinel. The photographs on the wall seemed to mock her, images of a happiness that was now a painful reminder of what was lost. The storm had arrived, and Grace knew she and her girls were standing right in its path. She took a deep breath, the first of many she would need to navigate the turbulent days ahead. In the quiet aftermath of Richard's departure, Grace made a silent vow. She would not crumble. She would not let bitterness consume her. Her daughters needed her. Now more than ever, they needed a rock, a steady presence in the swirling chaos of their upended lives. So Grace pushed her own heartbreak deep down into a place where she could deal with it later, in the lonely hours of the night. During the day, she wore a brave face for Ella and Naomi. She forced smiles, she spoke of hope, even when her own heart felt like a shattered vase. The practicalities of single motherhood descended quickly. There was less money, more responsibilities. Grace found a part-time job at a local bakery, waking before dawn to knead dough. The scent of yeast and sugar, a stark contrast to the bitterness she sometimes felt. She learned to fix leaky faucets, to manage bills on her own, to be both mother and father. There were days when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her, when the weight of it all felt too heavy. But then she would look at her daughters' trusting faces, and she would find a renewed strength she didn't know she possessed. She created new routines for her small family, simple routines, but ones that provided a sense of stability. Story time before bed became even more sacred. Weekend outings, though more modest, were filled with laughter and connection. She taught Ella and Naomi that even though their family looked different now, the love that bound them was stronger than ever. She showed them that broken things could still be beautiful, that strength often came from mending, not from never being broken at all. She wanted them to learn resilience not by words, but by watching her live it. There were moments of deep sadness, of course. A song on the radio, a familiar face in town, a question from one of the girls about their father. These could trigger waves of pain, but Grace allowed herself to feel it, then gently let it go. She would not let Richard's choices define her future, or the future of her daughters. She was building a new life, brick by painstaking brick. On the foundation of her unwavering love for her children, her vow was her compass, guiding her through the darkest nights. Section 5. Seeds of Resilience, Lessons in Love and Loss. Grace understood that children learn more from what they see than from what they are told. So, she lived her lessons. She showed Ella and Naomi that life could be unfair, that people could disappoint, but that one's spirit did not have to break. When bills piled up, she didn't hide her worry, but she showed them her determination to find a solution. She would sit with them, explaining things in simple terms, teaching them the value of hard work and perseverance. She wanted them to see that challenges were a part of life, but so was overcoming them. She never spoke ill of Richard in front of the girls. This was a difficult path to walk. The anger and hurt were there, simmering beneath the surface, but she knew that poisoning her daughters against their father would only harm them in the long run. She would say, "Your father made choices that hurt us, but he is still your father." She focused on teaching them forgiveness, not as a gift to the one who caused pain, but as a release for oneself. It was a seed she planted early, hoping it would take root in their young hearts. Love was the cornerstone of their rebuilt home. Grace showered her daughters with affection, with encouragement, with unwavering support. She celebrated their small victories, a good grade, a kind deed, a new skill learned. She taught them empathy, urging them to look out for others, to be kind even when it was difficult. She explained that true strength wasn't about never falling, but about getting up every single time with grace and courage. These were the lessons whispered in bedtime stories, demonstrated in daily actions, and woven into the fabric of their new life. The girls watched their mother. They saw her quiet strength, her resilience in the face of adversity. They saw her work hard, sacrifice, and still find moments for joy. They saw her cry sometimes in the quiet of the evening, but they also saw her wipe her tears and face the next day with renewed resolve. These unspoken lessons were powerful. They were absorbing her courage, her tenacity, her capacity for love. Grace was planting seeds of resilience, and though she couldn't see it yet, they were beginning to sprout, strong and true. Section 6. Blossoming in the sun, the daughter's ascent. Years passed, like pages turning in a well-loved book. The small house, once filled with the sharp edges of recent pain, slowly softened with new memories. Ella and Naomi grew from little girls into remarkable young women. They carried within them the lessons their mother had so diligently taught, not through lectures, but through her own quiet example. Grace watched them, her heart a mixture of pride and quiet wonder. They were her greatest achievement, her most beautiful creations, forged in the fires of hardship, but tempered with love. Ella, always the thoughtful one, excelled in her studies. She developed a keen mind and a compassionate heart. She earned a scholarship to a prestigious university and chose to study law. She wanted to fight for justice, to give a voice to those who were not heard. Her determination was a reflection of Grace's own unwavering spirit. Naomi, with her vibrant energy, found her passion in medicine. She became a nurse, her hands skilled and gentle, her presence a comfort to those in pain. She had her mother's empathy, her mother's desire to heal. Grace never pushed them towards specific careers. She only encouraged them to find what made their hearts sing and to pursue it with all their being. She had taught them the importance of independence, of relying on their own strengths. She had shown them that a woman could be strong, capable, and successful on her own terms. Their successes were a testament to her sacrifices, her unwavering belief in them. Each achievement, each milestone was a victory not just for them, but for Grace as well. It was proof that love and resilience could indeed conquer adversity. Their home, though still modest, was filled with a different kind of richness now. It was rich with accomplishment, with shared pride, and with the deep, unbreakable bond between a mother and her daughters. Grace had not only survived, she had triumphed. She had raised two incredible women who were now making their own mark on the world. They were kind, they were strong, they were compassionate. They were everything she had hoped they would be. The seeds she had planted in tears had blossomed beautifully in the sun. Section 7. Echoes of the Past. Richard's Lonely Road. While Grace and her daughters built a life of strength and quiet joy, Richard's path took a different turn. The new relationship, the one for which he had abandoned his family, eventually crumbled. The excitement faded, leaving behind a hollow echo. His career, once a source of pride, began to falter. Bad investments, coupled with a changing industry, left him struggling. The strong hands that once built sturdy structures now found less and less work. The confidence that had once defined him began to erode, replaced by a gnawing uncertainty. He found himself alone. The friends he had during his more prosperous times seemed to disappear when difficulties arose. The vibrant life he had chased turned out to be fleeting, superficial. He lived in a small, rented apartment, a stark contrast to the warm home he had once shared with Grace and the girls. There were no children's giggles here, no smell of Grace's baking, only silence and the heavy weight of regret. He often thought of Ella and Naomi, wondering about their lives, knowing he had forfeited his right to be a part of them. The years had not been kind to Richard. His health began to decline. The stress of his financial woes and his profound loneliness took their toll. He looked older than his years, his shoulders stooped, his eyes holding a permanent sadness. He had made his choices he once believed would bring him happiness. But happiness, he learned too late, was not something to be found by abandoning responsibility, by chasing fleeting desires. It was built carefully, with love and commitment, things he had carelessly thrown away. He heard snippets about his daughter's successes through mutual acquaintances, Ella, a lawyer, Naomi, a nurse. He felt a pang of pride, quickly followed by a wave of shame. He had contributed nothing to their achievements. He was a ghost from their past, a painful memory. He often wondered if they ever thought of him, if they hated him. The weight of his past actions pressed down on him, a constant heavy burden. His road had become a lonely one, paved with regret and missed opportunities. Section 8. A faint knock. The plea for mercy. One afternoon, Ella received an unexpected phone call. The voice on the other end was hesitant, weak, almost unrecognizable. It was Richard. He sounded frail, a shadow of the confident man she vaguely remembered from her childhood. He explained his situation, his voice trembling slightly. He was ill, he said, and struggling. He had no one else to turn to. He wasn't asking for much, just a little help. Perhaps a place to stay for a short while until he could get back on his feet. His words were a plea, a desperate reach across a chasm of years and pain. Ella listened, her heart a tumultuous mix of emotions. There was a flicker of old hurt, a memory of the little girl watching her father walk away. But there was also a sense of pity for the broken man on the other end of the line. She told him she needed to talk to her mother and sister. The call ended, leaving Ella with a heavy decision. This was not just about Richard. It was about them, about the principles Grace had instilled in them. It was about who they had become, despite the pain he had caused. She called Grace first, then Naomi. She relayed Richard's story, his plea. There was a long silence on the line as Grace absorbed the news. So many years had passed. So much water had flowed under the bridge. The wounds had scarred over, but the memory of the initial pain was still there, a faint ache. Naomi was initially resistant, her voice tight with remembered anger. Why should they help the man who had shattered their world and never looked back? Her reaction was understandable, a testament to the deep hurt he had inflicted. Grace, however, listened quietly. She thought of the man he had been and the broken man he had become. She thought of the lessons she had tried to teach her daughters about compassion, about forgiveness. This was a test, perhaps the ultimate test of those very principles. It was easy to preach forgiveness when the offender was distant, an abstract memory. It was far harder when they were knocking on your door, asking for mercy. Grace knew this decision would shape them, just as Richard's departure had shaped them years ago. Section 9. The Unburdening Heart, the Power of Forgiveness. Grace, Ella and Naomi gathered in Grace's cozy living room, the same room that had witnessed so much of their journey. They talked for hours. Ella spoke of the tremor in Richard's voice, the desperation. Naomi voiced her anger, her reluctance to open their lives to more pain. Grace listened, her gaze soft, her heart weighing the complexities. She reminded them gently that forgiveness was not about condoning Richard's actions. It was not about forgetting the pain he had caused. It was about freeing themselves from the lingering chains of bitterness. He is still their father, Grace had said many years ago, and those words echoed now. She spoke of compassion not as a weakness, but as a strength. To turn him away in his hour of need, she explained, would be to let his past mistakes continue to define them, to harden their hearts. It was a difficult choice, one with no easy answers. But slowly as they talked, a consensus began to form. It was not driven by a rekindled affection for Richard, but by a desire to live by the values they cherished. They decided to help him, not by welcoming him back into their lives as if nothing had happened, but by offering him a measure of kindness, a chance to find some peace in his final years. Ella, with her legal knowledge, helped him sort out his affairs. Naomi, with her medical skills, ensured he received proper care. Grace offered him a simple, quiet forgiveness, a release from the anger she had carried for so long. It was an act of profound strength, an unburdening of their own hearts. They did it for themselves as much as for him. In choosing forgiveness, Grace, Ella and Naomi found a deeper healing. They rose above the hardship he had inflicted, not by seeking revenge, but by extending grace. Their family bond, already strong, became even more resilient. They learned that love, in its purest form, could encompass even the most difficult acts of forgiveness. Their story became a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit, a reminder that even after the fiercest storms, the sun can shine again, and hearts can indeed heal and find peace.